Okay, so now talking about lactose, which is our second disaccharide that we'll be learning about today. This is a combination of galactose and glucose. So I'm going to label those as such. This one here, we have actually, you see how the OH is going up? This is galactose, and it's in the beta form. So this is beta D galactose. And then we also have our glucose. So the blue OH here is going down. So that means we have the alpha, on carbon number 1, we have an alpha hydroxyl, so alpha D glucose. And that overall is going to form, in this particular structure I drew, is alpha lactose. So it's alpha lactose because the carbon number 1 that is not, this carbon over here with the hydroxide that is not, does not have a glycosidic bond there. It is our free alcohol and it is in the alpha position. Therefore, this overall is alpha lactose. Okay, so let's draw just where these, just for clarity, where we're making this bond. So remember that one OH and one H are going to join together to make water. And then the other oxygen is what forms a bond with where the oxygen was in the other sugar. So we have this bond is made here, this ether is made here. You'll notice it looks a little bit different now, and the reason is because it has a different kind of glycosidic bond. So now remember we look at, we describe glycosidic bonds based off of the position of the kind of locked in carbon C1, as well as the carbon numbers that it's between. So let's start with that position. This hydroxide here, so let's use pink again. Carbon 1 on the leftmost sugar is going to be locked in now. There's no way for it to isomerize because you cannot make an aldehyde anymore. And that oxygen is now going up. So this glycosidic bond is going to be a beta glycosidic bond because that carbon 1 position is in the beta isomer. Okay, and then we're going to have to describe the carbon numbers. So again, we have carbon number 1 connected with carbon number 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a beta 1, 4, and then glycosidic bond. Next question, can lactose form both alpha and beta isomers? So the question is, can the second ring open? And yes, it's not tied to anything. That blue hydroxide that I have circled is not reacted with anything. It still has that hydrogen on it, so it can isomerize. So I still have an OH. As long as it's an alcohol, it can still isomerize. If it's an ether, it can't isomerize. So it still have the OH on C1 of glucose. Therefore, the ring can open. Is lactose a reducing sugar? So if it opens, it forms an aldehyde. So yes. So we know that it can ring open based off of the answer above. And so when it does ring open, it makes an aldehyde, which means if it has a aldehyde as the sugar in the linear, if it can make an aldehyde in a linear form, then it is a reducing sugar because you can oxidize the aldehyde further. And then lastly, just a little bit of where we see lactose in real life. We've talked a lot about milk and dairy products, and I feel like lactose intolerant is something that people hear about a lot. This is the lactose that they're talking about there. It's in milk and dairy products. So the enzyme that breaks down lactose is lactase. So just change the O to an A, and it breaks down lactose in the body. So the issue is that people who don't have lactase in their bodies, so if their bodies cannot produce lactase, that enzyme, then lactose cannot be digested in their stomachs. And so what happens is the lactose can then be fermented by bacteria in your colon and makes you really gassy. So it turns into methane, specifically CH4. So bacteria take the lactose and break it down for you since your stomach didn't do it, and it makes a lot of gassiness. So that's why people who are lactose intolerant get really gassy really quickly, is because they don't have enough lactase enzyme in their body. Okay, and then the last disaccharide that we're going to be talking about is sucrose, which is going to be the combination of, now you see we have kind of an up and down situation because of how this bond is oriented. So we have alpha D glucose and beta D fructose interacting in this one. So again, we're going to have the interaction of one of the oxygens and two of the hydrogens to make water. And the one oxygen left over is going to fill in the place of where both of the oxygens was. And that makes this ether bond here. So how would we describe the glycosidic bond in sucrose? Oh, I wanted to go ahead and say too that sucrose is table sugar. So on average, we consume about 150 pounds per year, the average person. If you like candy a lot, you probably have a little bit more. But how would we describe the glycosidic bond in sucrose? So again, let's look at our alpha carbons. So we're looking at the alpha carbons of the things that have the glycosidic bond. And so, I'm sorry, alpha carbons, carbon number 1 of where the glycosidic bond is. And so this is actually the case that we have both of our carbon 1s are actually interacting with each other. So we can go ahead and put 1, 1 as our numbers here. Carbon 1s, I'm sorry, carbon 2 for, don't mind me, there we go. Oh no. I lied. This is carbon number 1 because we have a ketose instead of an aldose. So we actually have a 1-2 linkage here. So looking at that, the carbon on that most right-hand corner, so it's that alpha carbon is what we call it, is we're going to have to show the orientation for both of them in this case, because both of those are those isomerizing carbons in our structures. So in aldoses, it's always carbon 1. In ketoses, it's always carbon number 2. So we need to describe both of them in this case. So up on the top here in glucose, it is alpha because it's pointing down, but over here in fructose, it's going up, so it's beta. So we actually need to describe both. So it's going to be an alpha beta 1-2 glycosidic bond. Okay, is sucrose a reducing sugar? So it's actually not a reducing sugar. And the reason why is because that alpha carbon, the one that can isomerize to and open to the ring form, neither of those for either of the monosaccharides making up this disaccharide can none of them have alcohols on them. They both have ethers. So this cannot ring open. So no, it is not a reducing sugar. So just last but not least, the sugar chains in our blood are actually really important. So we have these glycosidic bonds and saccharides in or it's called terminal saccharides in our blood types. And so our blood will have these sugars kind of hanging off those red blood cells. And that is what makes or defines the different types of your blood type. So we've heard a lot about or you hear a lot about like, oh, type O is the universal donor. They can give blood to anybody and they can accept it. Whereas like type A and type B are not exactly like that. So this is something, talking about these sugars that are on the end is absolutely critical in healthcare. So I've only shown you a couple different monosaccharides specifically, but you can imagine just by changing the direction of each of those hydroxides, it makes the different kind of sugar. So things like this is fucose, FUC, or galactose we've looked at, but then we also have these N-Ac-Glu and N-Ac-Gal. These are more the sugars that we see in our blood as well. So that's what the purple and green are. And they have these different groups on here that are important. And so you'll notice that all of the different blood types have the same like purple, pink, yellow, but then what is on the very end here is different for each blood type. And that is what determines whether our bodies can handle it or not. So type O, according to the Google, are about 43% of the population are type O. So they have this where there's no sugar here. And they're universal donors. Then we have type A, which are approximately 40%, and type B, which is approximately 12% of the population. And then additionally, there's type AB, which I believe it means that you have a mix of both of those different kinds of terminal sugars within one, on like the one blood cell. It's not just the same around, and that's about 5%. Type AB are universal acceptors or receivers. They can take any other kind of blood type. So you can imagine if someone with type O was given type B blood type as if someone who is type O, like my dad is type O, if he was given type B blood type, his body would reject that blood because it doesn't recognize what this sugar on the end is. So when there's no sugar here, the body can still recognize that this sugar is okay. It's not, or this molecule, this blood cell is okay because it's not having an adverse interaction. However, changing just the pink to the green or the green to the pink, or even having a mix of them makes it so that your body interacts and kind of sees that as a foreign invader and attacks it because it can't be used in your system. I am not a doctor, so I don't know much else about these blood types, but I'm happy if you're interested. I'm happy to have more conversations with you about those things, and I'll even do more research and find out more if you guys want to. Let me know.